Welcome to the Poetry Show with us, the podcast poets. This is a podcast that aims to bring poems and poetic discussion to people who love poetry. To those of you who maybe aren't all that sure, we know who you are. And to poetry novices, and maybe we can inspire you to try a poem for yourself. A word of warning, we might curse, though probably not gratuitously, unless someone talks about Trumsky. And anyway, we're just kind of PG-13. Every week we will discuss a theme and look at how four very different poets work within that theme to create a poem. And hopefully we'll have something for everyone. So we'll each do a poem and we'll chat about that poem and move on to the next. I'm Rose, and we have
Becca Miles.
Yes, and
Alan.
And
Kit Marshall.
Welcome, Kit. Welcome, Becca. Welcome, Alan. Okay, today's show is about, which is pretty funny, we're talking about loopiness anyway, but today's show's almost related. It's about the moon. Along with roses being red and violets blue, poets have written about Junes and moons. The moon is our own dear satellite and creates tides, influences the internal tides in the female body, and really does bring out the lunacy in some. Once I took Emily to A&E, and there were people shouting at the wall and ranting. Someone was singing and so on. I looked at a nurse. She shrugged, and I said helpfully, "It's a full moon, you know." And she visibly brightened and called to a colleague, "Full moon!" She smiled back at me and said, "That explains it. It's not normally like this, From werewolves to witchcraft, a full moon has taken a lot of blame. I used to say, the moon's always full at the Eastgate, which was a small restaurant with a busy bar that I tended at. I've got an occasional poem I wrote for my sister, which I might read, which is when her son Matt and his wife had their first child. But I will probably do one about Alan's old flat that we abandoned to the mice and the moon. And this is based upon a poetry open mic we used to go to in Bethel, and it had a train station that went by it. And if you tried to read your poem when the train went by, it wouldn't work. People would go, they'd hear the train coming to think, that's evocative. That's really groovy. I'll just keep reading. And the train got louder and louder till they're like, and you just saw their mouth moving, and they just had to just give up. So it was actually part of the open mic, the train. You could hear it wailing, because the trains wail. They pull, they go, woo, woo, in America. They do that. I miss that here, even after 12 years. Along the Danberry line. Trains rushing through Bethel sound loud warnings at all crossings. Distantly, hauntingly, past my complicated house and its neighborhood of polite apathy. Past barren, moonlit apartment where mice scuttle along historic floorboards searching for dropped crumbs of a departed tenant. Past the art space during poetry, causing readers to falter, plow vainly on for a while, then pause awkwardly, sometimes with dramatic effect. Past tragedies and marital sniping, past TV shows flickering through blue insomnia midnights. Then back along a sacred art gallery where the brave and mortal read their souls. Past the writer from Cannondale who has abandoned unfed mousies in the moon. Past fresh hope and new love in my little complicated house. A simple, single wailing train slides through so much drama, tied together by steel rails, crossroad wails, darkened veils. Mice, the moon, and poetry. So that is kind of I don't know, it's not really an occasion poem. I just was inspired to do it, actually, yeah.
Yeah, the moon has had a really incredible effect on humankind, I think, through the ages. I mean,
actually.
More so than the sun, even although we've sort of moved now to all sun deities, but the moon has got this, I don't know, it is I think the earliest form of worship was towards the moon and things moon-like. But can you imagine it, that you live out in the open, not in a house where you don't see anything? You're living out in the open, and this glorious, huge, ginormously magnified moon appears in the early evening.
Yes, and that would be a blessing.
And you can look at it, unlike the sun.
Oh, that's true.
Like the sun, you can't quite look at, but the moon you can study and you can see that it changes shape, and you can measure it.
Yeah, it does change shape.
You can see detail on the moon. You can see things which
the rabbit
give you that sort
of the buffalo and the man in the moon.
Yes. Is it cheese?
So the moon has always had that, and it's nurturing.
You're right, because you can look at it,
element.
And you can't look at the sun, can you, Bex? You're absolutely right. No, you can, but not well.
Yes, we see that's why.
Not for long.
Not for long.
That's
but in the suntime, in the daytime, you can see.
Yes.
But you really need a full moon or something else to see at night. So it would be a savior, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, in fact, I have a poem about
you have a
seeing
poem?
Seeing the moon in daylight.
Know what? The hint is in the Yes, I think
you set yourself up very nicely.
I think we're
going
to segue with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
This poem was written specifically for a book on the Green Man.
Mm. Oh yeah,
And
actually, good one.
It was it looks the book said, the Green Man, past, present, and future, and there wasn't much future in the book, so I thought I would have a futuristic Green Man, and so it came out as the midday moon. The sun is high in the sky on an almost cloudless day, where the luminous blue sheen is marred but slightly by contrails and sheets of not quite invisible white wisps. While here, by the midsummer-browned beach, leaves scoured by unseasonable storms and unaccustomed sweltering sunshine, is suspended a bright half-lemon moon. Its half-global casing mapped upon the plain, the tended tangent surface like a rind defined, complete with pith as the slope extends and the filigree of craters filtered blue, simulate the segmented centre of the slice, so oft suspended in my drink amongst the ice, which is discarded in an impatient trice. Unlike my extraordinary dainty midday moon, whose glowing hemispheric daylight boon will still be there tomorrow, spinning from the tides of a tumultuous chimerical deep. New life, the like of which I will never ever see, for eons long beyond my day will play upon the blades of what then replaces grass, perhaps a seeing, speaking, sentient plant, which in an idle moment turns its multi-sensory blades towards the clear blue, unpolluted, cloudless sky, remarking on the bewildering beauty of the timeless moon and its likeness to a fallen, broken fruit, pondering deeply as only a tree-like entity ever should, on creatures past and future as they stood, and wondered if upon this moon they ever wonder could.
Yes, I do like that. In fact, that's really good because yours is actually about the moon. Mine mentions it gratuitously in a few areas. No, actually, when Alan was in this place, there was mice everywhere, so it was pretty funny. But yeah, I remember that. That's I like that. That is true.
I like the half lemon moon.
Yes.
Oh, and then the rind. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, unfortunately, that's the kind of poem I want to sit and read over again, so I can look through it. So I'm trying to come up with my initial reaction to it. But
it's very easy to find yourself after a good poem, just kind of sitting and forgetting that we're doing a podcast.
Yeah. Just want to sit and ponder.
To absorb.
No, I do. I like that, and I like the fact that you are addressing the fact that eventually we pesky primates will be gone.
Yes.
And yes.
Yes.
And the next one, well, it could have been birds, because velociraptors got quite smart, and they could have just taken up, and gotten longer arms and just, gone about their business, and I can just see them just running the whole show. It'd be a whole world based on bird forms and dinosaurs, lizards. Yeah, I can see that. I like that. Actually might like the global warming. I don't know. Good, actually. Thank you very much for that. Okay, who is inspired by loopiness, lunacy, the moon? I love it.
I guess mine. I guess.
Yeah, go on then, Beck.
So I wrote this mostly last night, and it's still kind of raw, but probably useful to think about. And it's about a memory from back when I was younger. Moonlight lapped around my ankles on the Cornish shore at midnight. Bright white blood spilled from sky to sea, spreading through the waters, pulsing through my feet, pulling me before I knew the moon's full name. I could not see the tidal thread connecting me to that great light. The web that held these fervent words together, lux to light to lunacy, mensis to immensity.
Yes, exactly. If the moon went away, we would really suffer, wouldn't we? I think a lot of what we do is tied to the moon.
Well, it's like so I kind of fell down a hole of etymology, and I was finding where lunar comes from. Light it comes from lux, basically, and obviously leads to lunacy, and then how what we use moon is ultimately from sort of from mensis, which means to measure, because you can use the moon to measure the months, and that obviously leads to words like immeasurable and immensity, and I didn't know any of that, and I didn't know much about, like, I didn't know what the moon symbolized. Like, I hadn't been overeducated or educated at all. You know what I mean? And yet I had this moment of, like, real, almost spiritual connection when I was stood midnight, age like 12, ankle deep in Cornish water, and the moon was just sort of spreading throughout the sea, and it was and it's strange to try and look back on it with the education I have now, you know.
Well, sometimes our naive observations are great because they don't have any baggage. That's why children are so clear-eyed. They're not thinking about the mortgage and obligations. They just observe. You know, I do like that.
And I think the web of etymology indicates just how widespread the interest in the moon has come through culture.
Oh, yeah.
In that you find completely unrelated words, or not completely unrelated, but you find words like month and menstruation, and all of these have common ancestors or direct
and
links.
Measuring. That was interesting.
And measuring, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
because you wouldn't you? Because you can measure span.
Yeah. Ironically, I think that
faster than a season.
Our fear of the number 13 is also linked, because typically there are 13 lunar months in a year, and it is also a prime number, which was, you know, to early people who, when they were experiencing their math for the first time, it was quite a scary thing. I mean, 7 is another scary number that you find in ancient literature. But you find references to the moon right the way through the Old Testament. You know, very carefully hidden, because you know, we've moved into a sun god, so the moon references are reduced.
Do you think it's done that because the moon was so all powerful? It meant you could get back to your hut, your village, into safety at night. So you would almost worship the thing that comes along right when you need it most, or doesn't, because she's capricious.
Yes.
But the sun was fairly dependable even on a cloudy day.
I think that I'm not sure. I mean, certainly the moon has always had this female element to it, and
certainly in Western culture, certainly the moon and the sun have always been opposed. So if the sun has been female, then the moon has been male, and that's been the case in some Near East countries, certainly in early Near East countries, but certainly in Britain, in Celtic mythology, and in Greco-Roman mythology. The moon has been feminine.
I mean, I was shocked.
Well,
I think
that's nice. So there's always a dichotomy.
At around the age of 13 in religious education, you know, being told by a priest, you know, it said, well, actually, Abraham didn't go to Palestine because God told him to. It was very simple. The local king changed from moon worship to sun worship, and Abraham wanted to be a moon worshipper, so he wandered away. You know, he was wandered away or was chased away, one or the other. So it suddenly made you sit down and think, hey, maybe there's a wee bit more going on in those early stories, and then you start to think about what was going on, and then you start to begin to see the influence of the moon right the way through the early Old Testament.
I mean, as far as I understand it, the earliest sort of theorized calendar is I think it's a bone that's been notched with 13 times, but the notches haven't been done at the same time, so they're counting the number of full moons or the number of new moons, and
a new moon would be awful, wouldn't it? You just can't see anything at night. You're just doomed.
Yes. Well, the year was always a complicated thing with these intercalated days that didn't really exist, because you had 13 months, but they really only wanted 12. So, you know, you suddenly found this whole month of life which didn't exist. There was 300 days, so that gives you 2 months which don't exist. It's actually quite fascinating when you start looking at the history of our knowledge of the calendar. We knew we had this year of days, but it wasn't a nice, easy number to remember. 365 and a quarter doesn't calculate very well to a very primitive mind. And the sort of games that they played to make it all work out is actually quite fascinating.
So I'm over here clinking my coffee mug. So do you have something that talks about moon worship, Alan, or a worship? Oh, no?
No,
We're pointing at each other.
Well, there are, but they're very naive. I mean, this whole Mother Goddess issue of the moon is something I have written about, but I haven't selected any for
then
for
I
today.
think we'll go see what Kit's got. I would like to see.
I, with my background in Greco-Roman mythology, have brought a Diana poem. And this certainly trades in on the fact that Diana is a very feminine, the moon is a very feminine figure in Greco-Roman mythology, and also the idea of moon cycles, which we've been talking about, which is quite nice. Diana. Dear, beautiful child, I too have waxed and waned in the shade of a power greater than my own. I too have been made reflective, receptive, selfless, helpless, hanging pure and perfect in a deep, dark sky hateful to my silver. I see you gazing at me, remembering his fool's love of my body. He framed me in his selfish hands, a symbol of passive beauty. The full moon, for which he yearned nothing but the sun returned, and he loved you the same. Today, you do not gaze at me, though I hear you calling prayers in the dark you too made home. You understand now, and today you love the new moon, when I can break my cycle, permitted to be me. And child, I love you like you love me. We have no need for suns.
Am I right in is this a myth? But is it? They're all myths. You know what I mean. Am I right in having read that another of the connections between the moon and Diana is the fact that the crescent moon can look like a bow, like a
yes,
drawn
absolutely.
bow.
Yeah. So the huntress goddess is another one of her elements.
Oh, that would actually make it good to have just a sliver of a moon, because then it becomes a weapon. And it's not just something that you can't see as well at night. So then, yeah.
And yeah, when I found myself writing this idea of the moon as a mirror, then I thought obviously the new moon could be a positive thing in that way, which is unusual, as we've been talking about.
Well, exactly. Because in ancient times, when there is no 999 or an American 911, there's no one to come and help you. You do want to be able to get around and to see. So you would have to have daylight or moonlight. I've seen sometimes when it's so bright that, okay, it's a long time ago, so you can't arrest me now. But I would, especially if there was snow on the ground and a full moon, I could turn off the headlights of the car and drive. Especially if it was late at night and I was coming back at 2 a.m. and there were less people, and I just drive along going, this is amazing, I can see by moonlight, and I'm driving a car. And I don't do that anymore. But actually I don't. But it was back on the Merritt Parkway in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yes, that's a bit, well, it is at least all one way, so there shouldn't be someone coming towards you.
Yeah, there's no one coming toward you unless there's been a terrible misunderstanding. But yes, it's a very underpopulated road at 2 a.m. when you're coming home after bartending. But you could actually see to drive or to do anything. And snow especially is reflective. But in what way is a new moon then so helpful and powerful?
If you have this idea of the moon as something reflective, then what we're actually seeing of the moon is the sun's light.
Yeah.
And in fact, the moon isn't terribly reflective. It's just so much brighter compared to the stars around it that we can still see it. But I just thought that idea that were we really seeing the moon interested me. And obviously when you think about cycles and the cycles of abuse and how people who are abused are kind of seen as a symbol or put on a pedestal, and then later they find they become a disappointment, then you get that same idea that you are just a projection of somebody else's ideas. And the new moon is when you escape from all of that and you can't be seen, you can't be judged or worshipped or anything, and you're just yourself, independent. And that was the idea.
Oh no, I love
yes.
that.
I mean, I think it is important because the within that early Mother Goddess phrase, they essentially was the goddess of birth, which was the new moon, the goddess of life and marriage, which was the full moon, and then the goddess of death, which was the final the layer out, the person who was responsible. But then there's that bit of death in between that was completely different from any of those. That bit of our, if you like, our other life.
And another cycle, the cycle
Yes.
of life and death, and the new moon as rebirth is also a
Yes.
really, really good link. Yeah.
Of course, you can veer into the Jungian when you're talking about the moon as a reflection of the sun, because especially when you're talking about like the ability to just be yourself, or to be the yourself that you really are, that can tie into the notion that, you know, the shadow self, because if you think of it as not so much a shadow as a reflection,
What you are in the dark is your true self.
there's something like that, like it's I find it very easy to slip into the mystical when talking about the moon, and I wonder to what extent that's because of how it's seen in our culture, and to what extent it just is kind of mysterious. I don't know.
Well, because it is at night, and night is mysterious. What interests me is that earlier, Kit, you'd said that some Eastern cultures have the moon as male. Okay, now that's cool. So what are the properties then bestowed to the sun versus the moon? And now I'm not saying as in all of those, but can you just think of just one or two? Because I'm just curious by that. That's the anthropologist now speaking.
I think you're testing the limits of my knowledge there, I'm
Oh,
afraid.
no.
I came across that little fact in passing, and I made a note of it because all of my experiences of moon deities have been female.
Yes, my thought too.
Well, then that's what I'm going to have to. I have to look
I'm
that
going to
up.
have to
Then.
start looking this up.
I really
because
like the idea.
The maleness of the sun is because of its fierceness, and that is what that's Apollo pulling his chariot across the sky. Is because he's male, he's fierce, he's a warrior. He's there. So we're looking at a culture which has, if you like, places different characteristics.
Yeah, that's what I want to see, because women change shape.
Yes.
I mean, they can, and so and then the moon changes shape, but the sun just unless there's an eclipse,
Yes.
and then there's a massive, huge thing.
You know, I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called, but I remember there was a children's show that sort of told stories, and you had sort of animation along with those stories, and they'd be kind of fairy stories, and I can't remember what it was, because there was one which was a story where the sun was a woman and the moon was a man, because the sun was this princess who through the course of the story became deafened, and that's why the birds have to sing in order to wake her up every morning. And the moon was a witch's son who would grow thin and weak, and she'd have to nurse him back to health, and that was the waxing and the waning of the moon. But I cannot for the life of me remember like what the actual program was called. But there was this wonderful sort of animation with this man who was shaped like the crescent moon, and it was because he was kind of bent over, and it was fascinating.
Oh no, I like that. So then there is differences. Okay, I will be looking for that.
Yes.
I will be looking for that then.
Yeah, because the other thing that comes with the moon. I mean, my aunt was a nightclub singer.
Oh.
And my uncle Buddy was a band leader, and of course, when you opened up their piano stool, out came all these old songs from the 1920s, and nearly every single one of them had moons and loons and lagoons. The moon was there as a symbol of love. So that is the other side. Well, I mean, it's the Diana issue, but I think that's where a lot of this femininity. It's in the evening when you're can take a break from the chores of the day, that you can sit down and start romancing your sweetheart, and that's when the moon is up. So, and it's
well, that's true, because then chores are done unless you can't do us before electric lights and candles are expensive. Then you really are kind of held down to
which is excellent, of course, because Diana, Hecate, Artemis, so many of the moon goddesses were the virgin goddesses.
Oh.
Yes.
Also,
exactly.
Also,
Hecate was
just
the layer
because it's
out
night
too.
doesn't mean anything.
also the Virgin Mary is often depicted standing on a crescent moon.
That's true.
Like
Actually,
in
yes,
like
it should be a waxing moon, I hope.
I don't. Presumably,
Because,
I don't. Sorry, that's me remembering something that I'm going to have to look up later.
Yes.
In fact, listeners, look that up in case I got it wrong.
Well, I mean, there is one set of arguments. I mean, particularly Robert Graves takes this line where he actually relates the three Marys in the story of Jesus to the three phases of the mother goddess. Mary who born him, Mary the sister of Martha as the wife, and Mary Magdalene, who was the layer out. So Mary Magdalene was essentially Hecate. I know some people want to put Magdalene as the wife, but I prefer Graves' solution, because the whole idea of the layer out, to put the witch, which is often described as anyway, is much more redolent.
Yeah, all of that symbolism comes back around when you have the triplicate moon goddess, you have the Virgin, the Mother, and the Crone, and you have, as you were describing there, the Marys. Everything comes back, and you find so many associations with the moon, like death and rebirth with the Mother, or the Virgin goddesses, or what we were saying earlier about the crescent moon, obviously as a sickle, a symbol of death. Everything seems to come back together with the moon, which I think is one of its best properties when you're researching it, is you find links between cultures, even cultures that perhaps couldn't have communicated with each other, and we've all come to similar conclusions. Everyone's looked for a picture in the moon. We've all seen something different, and I love that.
Yes.
Was it E. Cummings that said you are whatever a moon has always meant?
Ooh.
Yes.
Oh wow! You know what? I like that.
Yeah. And we could argue that we wouldn't be here without the moon.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, because one of the issues that what the moon does is it gives tides.
Oh yes, that's true.
And
yes,
and
exactly.
it is thought that the process of tides probably provided the stresses that would need to have, even if it hasn't actually caused the trigger of evolution, it actually stress causes evolution to happen faster. And the fact that animals or creatures would have been stranded on the shore, and eventually they figured out how to survive during the bit between the tides, and then they became
natural
only able to
selection did
survive.
it bit.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
wiggle.
That was my understanding of one of the possible explanations for why creatures came out of the sea. Because when you're living in the sea, there isn't that much reason to leave, because you've got you've got a fairly constant environment.
Food comes to you.
And you've got a fairly constant environment, and you don't need to worry about how am I supposed to reproduce on land.
I mean, certainly you could say that on another planet you may not be able to, or evolution would have been a lot slower, because the stresses would have been different. The stresses could still be there, but they would be different stresses, and therefore evolution might have taken a different path.
Does anyone have any more thoughts on the moon in a poetic sort of way?
I have a very small fragment of Sappho.
I would love to hear it.
That is one of my favourite fragments of Sappho, translated by Alan Puchigan. Stars clustered near the fair moon, dim their shapely shimmering, whenever she rises, lucent to the brim and flowing over.
Yes. I once did, I guess, poetic discussion once a week at a home for elders, and they wanted me to bring in everything, and we did a whole week on Sappho, and it was just finding these fragments, and I don't remember the translator now, but that's got to be at least 20 years. And I went, well, this is, because, you think, oh, the classics, and it was really good stuff. She's such a great writer. I'm just sorry that so much of it hasn't come forward, but a lot, some has, I guess, enough to whet our appetites and make us wonder, leave us wondering what was out there. You're looking at your words, Alan. Do you have a poem?
Yes, I mean, I'm going to even include Croydon in this poem.
Oh, well done.
South London, my folks. Moon over Santo Domingo. I see you, precious moon, that smiles on Croydon town so clear tonight. That silver glow that tames the sun and bathes still water's silver sheen, or glitters on the breeze's ripples, making rivers flowing eddies glister, bringing dark to life and light to night. I see you smiling on the sea, glowing in the wake of ships, and whales grinning from the caps of breaking waves, to wrest a grin from grim and grizzled faces, melting hearts which on any other day would turn the Gorgon back to stone and scare away the fiercest winter storms. But best of all, I see your beaming smile upon the face of my delight. Alas, alone, asleep may be, or sleepless dream of me, bathed together by that self-same sylvan light, stirring the breeze through the palm fronds and memories of mirrored lakes and glowing mists, as she lies alone in the moonlight in Santo Domingo.
That's right. because it is the same moon. That was, you were back in England then.
Yes.
And I was, because I travel all the time, because that's where the skeletons are. They refuse to ship them to me. I don't know why that is.
Must be one of the romantic aspects of the moon is that even if you're far apart, you can gaze at the same moon.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we'll see the same shape of it too, because you might end up with a cloudy day somewhere else or whatever. But it's the same shape. It's going to be a crescent moon, a waxing or a waning moon, or a full moon.
If I could take a quick term for the irreverent, there's a joke out there on YouTube on a little animated series called As Stuff Movie where there's this couple and they're out together and he says, it's just you and me and the moon, and then it pans out and the moon's saying, hey, you two should kiss.
The moon is a watchful eye.
The moon's a voyeur. All right, that's it. Keep an eye on that moon. What is it really doing in your window? Use the moon to inspire yourself and write some words down. And I am now really going to look into the sun and moon dichotomy and the different personalities that are awarded these celestial beings. You too can get involved. You can be inspired by what we've been doing and write ideas down, or you can send us some ideas for themes or topics that you would like to hear us discuss, or do them all. Do them all. So come back next time when we might be discussing seasons or sleep or prophets, or maybe something that you have sent in. And we have a whole bunch of them now. We're going to be discussing that at some future time. So we have been The Poetry Show, and we are the Podcast Poet. So tweet to us on Twitter at Podcast Poets. Email us at podcast@podpoets.com. And find us on iTunes, and SoundCloud for that matter. But find us on iTunes and give us reviews and ratings. This has been The Poetry Show, produced and edited by Adam Taglietti, as a production of Eden Agency.